In the final days of World War II, as Berlin collapsed beneath relentless Soviet artillery fire, Adolf Hitler disappeared into a maze of underground bunkers beneath the Reich Chancellery. The Third Reich was crumbling. Soviet troops were closing in from every direction, and somewhere beneath the ruins of Berlin, the most wanted man in the world was preparing for his final act. What happened next would become one of history's greatest mysteries, not because the evidence was missing, but because the people who found it chose to hide it. By April 1945, the Soviet Union had launched one of the largest military offensives in history. Millions of Red Army soldiers pushed toward Berlin, determined to end the war in Europe once and for all. But alongside the advancing armies was a special Soviet unit with a very different mission. Acting under direct orders from Joseph Stalin himself, agents of SMERSH, the Soviet counterintelligence organization whose name literally meant death to spies, were given one task above all others: find Adolf Hitler, alive or dead. As Soviet forces fought street by street through the ruined German capital, Hitler remained hidden inside the Führerbunker, a heavily fortified underground shelter buried beneath the Reich Chancellery garden. Above him, Berlin burned. Entire districts were reduced to rubble. Yet even as Soviet troops closed in, Hitler refused to surrender. On April 29th, he married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, inside the bunker. Less than 24 hours later, both were dead. According to witnesses inside the bunker, Hitler and Eva Braun took their own lives on the afternoon of April 30th, 1945. Their bodies were carried up a narrow staircase into the shattered garden above. There, loyal SS guards drenched the corpses in petrol and set them ablaze. The goal was simple. Hitler had ordered that his body must never be captured and displayed by the Soviets. When the fire finally burned out, the charred remains were buried in a shallow crater among the ruins. But Stalin wasn't convinced. Even after reports reached Moscow that Hitler was dead, Stalin suspected a deception. He believed Hitler may have escaped Berlin entirely. As Soviet soldiers captured the city, SMERSH investigators began a massive search of the bunker complex and surrounding grounds. Every room was examined, every witness was interrogated, every clue was collected. The hunt for Hitler had become one of the Soviet Union's highest priorities. The first discoveries seemed straightforward. Soviet investigators recovered the bodies of Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, and his wife Magda. Nearby, they found the bodies of their 6 poisoned children. Witnesses identified the remains, and Soviet pathologists confirmed their identities through detailed autopsies. But Hitler remained missing. Then on May 5th, investigators made a breakthrough. Near the bunker's emergency exit, Soviet search teams uncovered a shallow burial site. Inside were the badly burned remains of a man and a woman. Close by were the bodies of 2 dogs. The location matched witness testimony perfectly. Numerous survivors from the bunker had described Hitler and Eva Braun being burned and buried in precisely this area. Suddenly, the Soviets appeared to have found exactly what they were looking for. The remains were transported to a military hospital in Berlin, where Soviet forensic specialists began an intensive examination. The bodies had been heavily damaged by fire, making visual identification impossible, but investigators possessed one powerful tool: dental records. Hitler's teeth were unique. Years of dental treatment had left him with extensive bridge work, crowns, and custom dental appliances. Soviet investigators tracked down Hitler's dental assistant and dental technician, both of whom had worked closely on his dental care. When shown the recovered dental remains, they identified them as Hitler's. The evidence was so specific that many investigators believed the case was effectively solved. On paper, the conclusion seemed clear. The burned man was Adolf Hitler. The burned woman was Eva Braun. Yet the story did not end there. As investigators dug deeper into the evidence, questions began to emerge. Some forensic findings did not perfectly match witness accounts. Certain details about the bodies puzzled Soviet scientists. There were disagreements among investigators about exactly how Hitler had died. Some evidence suggested cyanide poisoning. Other reports focused on the commonly accepted story that Hitler had shot himself. The deeper they looked, the more uncertainty appeared. Most importantly, Stalin himself remained skeptical. Despite the dental identification, Stalin refused to fully accept the conclusions of his own investigators. He ordered further inquiries. New witnesses were interrogated. Special reports were commissioned. Soviet intelligence officers spent months questioning surviving bunker personnel, searching for contradictions in their stories. They wanted proof beyond any doubt. What happened next would have consequences for decades. Rather than publicly presenting the evidence they had gathered, Soviet authorities chose secrecy. The autopsy reports were classified. Investigation files disappeared into secret archives. Even Soviet officials were often given conflicting information. Some were told Hitler was dead, others hinted that he might have escaped. The confusion soon spread beyond the Soviet Union. At conferences with Allied leaders, Stalin deliberately suggested that Hitler could still be alive. He hinted that the Nazi leader might have fled Germany by aircraft or submarine. These statements carried enormous weight. After all, if anyone knew the truth, surely it was the Soviet Union, the nation that had captured Berlin and recovered the evidence. The result was exactly what Stalin's secrecy created: uncertainty. Across Europe and America, rumors exploded. Stories emerged claiming Hitler had escaped to Spain. Others said he had fled to Argentina. Some believed he was hiding in secret Nazi colonies in South America. With Soviet archives locked away and official information scarce, conspiracy theories flourished. The absence of transparency created a vacuum that speculation eagerly filled. For decades, the Soviet Union kept much of its investigation hidden from the world. Historians had only fragments of information. Researchers were forced to rely on witness accounts, rumors, and scattered intelligence reports. The truth remained buried behind the Iron Curtain. Then, more than 20 years later, cracks began to appear. In 1968, Soviet sources finally released portions of the investigation. For the first time, Western historians gained access to details about the autopsies, interrogations, and forensic examinations conducted in Berlin after the war. The documents revealed the extraordinary effort the Soviets had invested in identifying Hitler's remains. They also exposed the internal disagreements, doubts, and debates that had existed from the beginning. As more evidence emerged over subsequent decades, most historians reached the same conclusion. Adolf Hitler had not escaped Berlin. He had died in the Führerbunker on April 30th, 1945. The dental evidence remained the strongest and most convincing proof. Despite lingering questions surrounding certain details, the overwhelming weight of evidence pointed to the same outcome. Yet by then, the damage had already been done. Half a century of secrecy had transformed Hitler's death into one of history's most enduring conspiracies. Millions of people around the world had grown up hearing stories of hidden submarines, secret escapes, and Nazi colonies at the end of the earth. Entire books, documentaries, and television programs were built around theories that likely would never have existed had the Soviet Union simply revealed what it knew in 1945. In the end, perhaps the greatest irony is this: the Soviet Union was probably the first government to discover convincing evidence of Hitler's fate. Its investigators found the bunker, they found the witnesses, they found the bodies, they gathered the dental records, they assembled the forensic reports, and yet, instead of ending the mystery, they helped create it. For more than 50 years, the truth remained trapped inside secret Soviet archives while rumors spread across the globe. The world searched endlessly for answers that may have been sitting in a locked file cabinet all along. Hitler's death became one of the most famous conspiracies in modern history, not because the evidence was missing, but because those who found it chose to keep it hidden.